The inertial dampeners are... Oh, gotta run. I'll call you back. Today's episode is brought to you by Star Trek issue 500. Why? Because I drew a story in it. So look for it in your favorite comic book shop stores, or you can order it online from the internet. Star Trek issue 500, the 500th issue of Star Trek, published by IDW Publishing. Now let's get to that awesome theme song.
He got into vintage audio a year ago, but there's a lot of things he still doesn't know, so he started up a channel on YouTube, and here he is now, the Vintage Newbie.
Wow, I forgot how much I hate that song. Welcome everybody to another episode of The Vintage Newbie. My name is Vernon Smith, and I am the Vintage Newbie because I'm Vernon Smith and I have a bunch of vintage stereo equipment, and I'm kind of a newbie to it because I just got into this stuff about 2 or 3 years ago. Normally, I'm drawing comic books, indie comics, sometimes stuff like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Star Trek. And when I am, I'm listening to music on my stereo. Now, when I started getting into this stuff, I would get a piece at a time, which I still kind of do, and I usually talk about one piece at a time. So if you go back to my extensive backlog, a catalog of videos, you'll see them talking about each one of these pieces behind me, and many more. Because normally I would see videos about these pieces and they'd just be like these 2 or 3 minute things that were just a brief run through showing them, but not really getting into the functions and features and stories behind them. So I try and get into the functions and features and stories behind them. So there you go. If you've never been here before, you're all caught up to speed, except for one other thing. This is a pretty unscripted show, except for now, for today. And we also won't be talking about just one piece, because for today, I kind of have a guideline to follow. You see, Kevin over at Skylabs Audio tagged me personally. And by that, I mean he just posted a video and said, hey, anyone else that wants to do this, go for it. And I wrote in the comments, I'm gonna. And he said, okay. So that to me is a personal invitation, like my auto tuning, personal invitation to go along with this. So I did. He put out about 10 or 11 questions and even said you can make up some of your own if you want. So that's what I did. And so that's what I'm doing. But before I get into that, let me give you a brief little tour of this gear behind me. Okay? See you in a bit. Alright, here's my reel-to-reel player. And a completely realistic brand rack with about 2 full pieces of stereo equipment in it. Some more speakers. Turntable. CD player, and a second rack with about 2 full stereo systems. Wasn't that exciting and uninformative? Okay, question number 1. What's the first piece of gear that led you down the hi-fi rabbit hole? Well, alright, so my first piece of hi-fi gear, which mine isn't really hi-fi, it's more what you'd call mid-fi, because I know hi-fi is mostly brands that I've never heard of, and maybe you haven't either. Oh, we're ignorant buddies. But my first piece of vintage stereo equipment was a dual 522 turntable that my high school girlfriend's dad gave me back in like 1990 or so. Because in case you didn't hear when I mentioned it before, or in case I didn't mention it before, I'm a 50-year-old punk rocker. So, back in 1991 or so, my high school girlfriend's dad gave me a record player. It was a dual 522, and I had it for about 15 years until 2005, when, being from New Orleans, Hurricane Katrina came and washed it all away. And I did not have any other vintage hi-fi stereo to go with it. I just had whatever contemporary pieces I could get my hands on, like whatever Pioneer Techniques Kenwood that I'd find at a local Circuit City or Best Buy or whatever the box stereo stores at the time were. But after all that got destroyed, I just switched to iPod and computer speakers until a few years ago when I got back into this. And that was because a buddy of mine that I was talking with and said I was getting into old stereo equipment, which for me was like 90s stuff that I kind of grew up on, like the black plastic stuff with like tons of buttons all over it. And he said, I got a piece that you might like. It's a 70s silver-faced realistic receiver. And I was like, ooh, okay. So I went and checked it out. And it looked a little something like this. Hit it! This is the STA-84 from Realistic that I was given, and you might not have seen it in that other stereo because it is no longer mine. I gave it to my daughter about a year ago for her birthday, and she rocks it in her room with her CD player, turntable, tape deck. But yeah, this thing is super cool looking. I love it. This is... I've got a couple other Realistics, got a Pioneer, got a Sansui, and this is the coolest looking of all of them. Dude, the slider knobs, which a lot of people hate, I freaking love it. And yeah, the entire thing lights up red whenever it's on a station. It's showing up white at the end of it, but when you see it in real life, it is just bright red with like this cool blue that looks purple on screen. But it's not. That's just how the lights look. And this thing looks cool as shit. So this is the thing that got me into 70s vintage hi-fi stereo equipment. But remember that turntable I mentioned that I got back in high school, but that was then destroyed about 15 years later? Remember? Well, here it is. Not the same one, mind you, but I found one just like it recently. It was in beautiful physical shape, but it needs some work on it. Sometimes the platter spins backwards, and the auto start and stop do not work. So, it functions as a fully manual table, and it sounds pretty good. I got it because the one that I had, it was a beast. Nothing ever went wrong with it in the 15 years that I owned it. I never even had to replace the stylus. Like, that thing was just an absolute tank. So hopefully with this one, if I can get it up and running, it will be the same, because I plan on giving it to my daughter when she's in high school, or when she's like 16 or something like that, because I think that's how old I was. So yeah, let's get to question 2, shall we? Question number 2. Name the favorite piece of hi-fi equipment that you currently own. That would be this guy right there, the Sansui 7000 receiver. Not the G7000 from the later 70s, but just the Sansui 7000 receiver. This thing was made in like 1971 to 1972. It's got like 70 watts per channel. Thing weighs like 30 or 40 pounds. I had never heard a Sansui receiver before. I'd heard of them, but never actually heard one. And a buddy of mine gave it to me. He picked it up at a thrift store. He was having some issues with it. it was just lying in pieces around his house for months, and he was like, dude, you want to just take it and do something with it? And I was like, sure. So I did. I cleaned it, put it back together, it's amazing. It sounds really, 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 really good. If you find one, pick it up. It's got like 2 turntable inputs, 2 tape inputs, 1 aux. You can hook 3 sets of speakers into it. I've just got 1 set of speakers. It's these Advent Laureates right behind me, and this thing it cranks. I stream through it. I've got this Technics SLD1 turntable plugged into it, the Denon CD DVD player underneath it plugged into it, and I've got a Technics tape deck down below plugged into it, and it cranks. I love it very, very, very much. It's cool looking, the different colored lights and stuff. My only my only issue with it is that when you turn it to phono or to aux, all these lights go out and it just says phono or aux. But yeah, it sounds amazing. Question number 3. Ooh, kind of going to the opposite end. Name the product you bought that you regretted. That's an easy one. That would be the Insignia NS BTST-21. Yeah, it just rolls off the tongue, right? Well, yeah, that turntable sucked about as much as its model number did. I got one of these. I'd seen like some reviews for it online. It seemed pretty cool because it was an entry-level turntable. It was a Best Buy brand, but it had like a counterweight on the tone arm. You could adjust the anti-skate. I think you could swap out the cartridge and stylus on it. I don't exactly remember because it was a couple of years ago when I got this thing, but it looked cool. And then they were half off, so I got one for my daughter, got one for myself, and they both broke within 3 days of use. Both of them. When hers broke, I swapped it out for another one. Then that one broke, and then mine broke too. And I was like, yeah, just take them all, give me a refund. And then I got her an Audio-Technica LP60, and that thing's been rocking pretty solidly ever since then. And the LP70s that just came out look really cool too. Anyway, this isn't about that. So, question number 4. If you could only use one song to demo your system, what would it be? If it's a song, I'm going to go In Bloom by Nirvana. You know, that thing, yeah, it's very full, very vibrant sounding, very well produced. It's got, clean, slower parts. It's got louder, rocking, distortion parts. So it's got a good range to it. It's got, kind of more melodic vocals and more screamy vocals. So to me, it's a well-rounded song. It's usually what I take with me if I'm buying or selling speakers and I'm meeting up with someone in public, just to kind of test out how they sound. Question number the next. If money were no issue, what is your perfect system? Well, I don't really have much that I can think of, but because like I said, I'm happy with what I do have, but there are some things that I haven't heard and don't have, and they are well out of my price range because I'm just a poor comic book artist. I don't know why I'm doing this for that, but I am. So now you are too. Take it. It's yours. Run with it. For speakers, I guess I would go with the JBL L100. I think that's what they're called, or Century L100. I don't know. They've got the orange waffle looking front, and they're big, and I've heard great things about them. and they're like $1,500 and up, so I don't own a pair. I have some JBL bookshelf speakers right there that I think were from a home theater system, because they did have a center speaker that came with them. And these things are S26-2s, and they sound really good. But I'm sure these JBL L100s, or maybe the Jubles, I've heard good things about those too. For a receiver, I'm going to go with the classic Marantz 2270, because I haven't had one of those either. I've got a couple of Realistics, got a Pioneer, got a Sansui, so let's round it out with a Marantz. Why not? Tape deck, I am going to go with the Marantz 5220, because that thing looks super cool. The light display, the meters look awesome, and it's a diagonal load tape deck, which I'll get to shortly, how much I love diagonal load tape decks. Question number 6. If you had to choose one music format, what would it be? I'm going to go vinyl on that one. And not just as like a music purist, music snob kind of person. I got into punk rock music back in 1988 when I was in 8th grade, a little 13-year-old skater punk kid, and a lot of those bands were putting out music on vinyl. Now, in kind of the mainstream world, people were more into cassettes. CDs were kind of gaining more, I guess, popularity, or kind of they were priced at a point to where like folks were able to get them, even though they still were pretty expensive from what I recall. I'd had a few records when I was a kid. I got like Kiss Destroyer and Kiss Alive 2 when I was in 2nd grade at like a school fair. But I was mostly cassettes throughout elementary and high school, and junior high, I mean. But yeah, towards the end of junior high, 8th grade, 9th grade, started getting into vinyl, because a lot of these punk bands were putting out stuff on vinyl, and there was a lot of cool stuff that came with it. Liner notes, pictures. They were usually on different colored vinyl. 10-inch records, 12-inch records, 7-inch records. The 7-inches were almost always on like some kind of different colored vinyl. And since these were broke bands on indie labels, they're only putting out like 200, 500, 1,000, 2,000 copies. So when you did get something, it was like a limited thing, and it was kind of like a collector's item. So that made it cool too. So yeah, one of my biggest regrets with Katrina was not getting my records out, because I had hundreds and hundreds of them, and I'll never be able to replace them, because they were things that I got at shows when I was like 15, 16 years old. Some of the things I've tried looking up, and they go for hundreds of dollars each, and so yeah, can't do it. But all things being equal, I would go vinyl. It's just a cool physical medium. Like CDs are cool, but they're so small, and yeah, just records, they just look really cool. So that would be it. Question number 7. What's a stereo product that people love that you just don't understand? I'm going to go with Macintosh. I know people love them. They seem really expensive. I guess they're cool because they are still around, and they will still service them, I guess. I think I've heard something like that. I don't know. They look neat, I guess, but I kind of like the silver faced 70s stuff. Even when there's like older silver faced stuff, but it's like a black faced model. I'm just like, nah, that's kind of more 80s and 90s looking. So yeah, I don't get the appeal of Macintosh. I'm sure it sounds great. I'm not shitting on it or anything. If people like it, good for them. Just not for me. What is your next upgrade? I'm thinking, because I've seen a pair of Realistic Nova 8B speakers locally. I've got a pair of 7Bs, and I recapped them, and I got them off the floor, put them on stands, because when I first got them, they sounded really, really muffled. But yeah, I had them sitting on the floor, And then I heard people saying, "Oh, you gotta recap them, like replace the capacitors." And seemed like a pretty easy job. I'm not a tech guy by any means, but it was just one capacitor, and I kind of know my way around a soldering iron, so I was able to do it. It helped the sound some. Got them off the floor. That helped the sound some too, but they still just sound. I don't even. The best way I can describe it is it sounds like if you're listening to music with your hands over your ears. Not that bad, but kind of close to it. It just doesn't sound like, yeah, these JBLs sound really good. The Advent Laureates sound really good. Hell, the Minimus 7s on top sound really good. But yeah, but I really want the realistic speakers to go with the realistic system there, so maybe I'll give the 8Bs a shot. But I try and, if I'm getting something new, because I'm running out of space, running out of money, so if I get something, I usually sell something, so I guess I'd probably have to sell these 7Bs to get the 8Bs and just hope that the 8Bs were good and that they don't sound worse than these. So that is my next upgrade, because like I said, I'm happy with what I have. I like everything in my collection. Let's see. Ooh, a piece of equipment that you've kept in your system for looks alone. That's an easy one. Techniques RS630 US cassette deck. Much like that Marantz tape deck that I talked about earlier, the 5220, this one is a diagonal load cassette deck, and I think that's just super cool. And this one's super cool. So let me just show it to you. It's actually working now, so it's not only for looks alone, but I only recently got it fixed. I've had it for about 2 years, and I got it fixed like a month or two ago. So for the longest time, it was just sitting there looking pretty. It's got these big meters on it, so I'd still hook it up to my receiver, press the record button, and just watch the meters going whenever I was playing music. But yeah, it's working now, so let's flip this camera and get a better look at it, shall we? Okay, here it is, the RS630 from Techniques. Yeah, big old meters. I'm pretty sure these are metal dials. Bunch of switches. You can switch it from regular to chrome tape. The buttons are nice and heavy and clunky. And dude, to open it up, you slide this door open. What? That's cool. Put the tape in diagonally. And look, they got this mirror there, so if you're like standing up above it, if you're, if it's sitting down lower than eye level, you can look at the mirror and you can see what tape is in there. That's pretty freaking cool. Then yeah, press the old play button. Look at that. Meters. There you go. Awesome. Yeah, I love the look of this thing. Wood on the sides. Pretty freaking about it. Question number 11. What's an accessory that's come out recently that you couldn't imagine living without? Well, that would be this guy right there. That little white box. It's an Apple Airport Express 2, and it is how I stream music. Got it plugged into the old Sansui right there, and I just stream from my phone into that. Love it. Now for my own personal questions. The first one. What's the best deal you've gotten on a piece of equipment? That would be this guy right here. The Realistic STA90 receiver. This guy popped up on Marketplace about a year and a half ago for $50. Now, the only Realistic receiver I'd had before was that STA84 that I showed earlier. I looked it up and folks were raving about it. 45 watt per channel receiver made from like, I think 76 to 79, something like that. But there were just pages and pages on several different forums just raving about how great of a receiver this thing was. So I went and checked it out. Guy plugged it into his truck and it sounded really good. It was very staticky, but I was just getting into taking receivers apart and cleaning them with Deoxit, and so that's what I did with this one. It was insanely filthy. Oh, and he also threw in a free cassette deck with it. And it's the matching cassette deck, the SCT-11. And so let me also say, with my question of what's the best deal you gotten, I'm not counting free stuff, because free is just somebody giving you something. I just mean like something really great for a good price. So yeah, SCT-11, which is also a diagonal load cassette deck. Love it. Made by Hitachi. This thing, it took me like 2 solid days, like morning to night, of just cleaning, getting in there with Q-tips, rubbing alcohol, deoxit, putting it back together. It would work, then it would get staticky, taking it apart again, cleaning everything again. But it sounds just really warm and vibrant and full. I love this receiver. It sounds amazing. If you get one, if you find one, pick it up. It's worth it. Next question. What's the longest hunt you've gone on for a piece of gear? That would be for this one, the Realistic Lab 300 turntable. So as you can see here, I have an entire Realistic rack with a couple of receivers, a couple of tape decks, 8-track, speakers, but the one thing I was missing was a turntable. A couple would come up locally, but they would be gone almost instantly. Lab 400, Lab 420, 2 direct drive ones. Almost got a Lab 500 off of eBay, but didn't work out. There was a Lab 440 like 2 hours away, but the guy was like super flighty and spacey, and I think the thing's still up on there like a year later. But then I saw this one at a stereo shop called Tom Sound in Birmingham, Alabama. I'm from New Orleans, so that's 5 hours away, which means a 10-hour road trip. It was a good time. I had fun, and I love this turntable. It's a belt drive. It is super solid. It plays speed spot on, and it's just cool looking. So I'm very happy with it, and I do not regret the road trip at all. My final question: what is the most unique or oddball piece of equipment that you own? For me, it is this guy right there. A Sound Design TX0868, I think the model number is. Let's take a closer look at it, shall we? Yeah. Here it is, the Sound Design TX0868. Cassette player, cassette recorder, 8-track player, and 8-track recorder. Yeah, I had never really messed with an 8-track recorder before, and I ended up finding a couple of blank 8-track tapes that were still sealed at an estate sale. It came with another 8-track recorder that it sounded okay, but not all that great, but this one sounds really, really good. As good as you can for an 8-track player. And the cassette deck sounds really, really good. I got this for like 10 or 15 bucks at some junk shop on the side of the road out in the middle of nowhere. I looked it up whenever I saw it there and saw that like that guy V Westlife, who does a lot of cool videos on vintage gear, he was raving about it, and I was like, okay, screw it, 10, 15 bucks, I'll check it out. It was really dirty when I got it, and when I took it home and took it apart, I found out just how dirty it was. It was filled with like roach eggs and roach spray, and I mean, like, it took me days of cleaning. This thing was so gross, and like letting it sit out in the sun to just air out and clean up and not fill my house with decades old bug spray or whatever. But yeah, I think I might have thrown a new belt on it. I don't even remember, but it sounds amazing. One of the best tape decks I've ever heard. Best 8-track recorder I've heard. I love this thing to pieces. And I just realized I forgot to answer one of the original 10 or 11 questions from Kevin at Skylabs. And that was, what's the last piece of equipment that made you want to re-listen to your entire music collection? Well, that's easy. That happens anytime I get something new. And the last two things I got were this Technics SLD2 turntable and this Denon something or other DVD player that plays CDs, and it has a brushed aluminum silver face front, so it blends in with all the rest of this stuff. So this made me listen to all my CDs again. This has been having me listen to all my records again. This is my first vintage direct drive turntable, because this dual 1019 up here is an idler drive, and that Realistic Lab 300 is a belt drive. So now I've rounded out the bunch with a direct drive, and this thing's pretty cool. I'm going to do a video on it soon, so stick around and find out about that. But yeah, it's a great turntable, and I love it. Thanks for sticking around through all of my ramblings and walkthroughs on everything. Hopefully this wasn't too bad. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope it provided an insight into answers of questions. If you feel like answering them yourself, make a video. Link it in the comments below me. Until then, have a blessed day. And don't forget to hit your local comic shop on September 4th to pick up Star Trek issue number 500.